Hi, folks. So I'm going to go over some things about the what is an essay reading that we did for this week. And then there will be a second set of slides that goes over the writing process concept. And both of those will be required viewing for you for this first unit. Okay. Okay, so in the reading, what is an essay? You likely read about how an essay starts with an idea, and the idea is something that the writer wishes to share with the reader. An essay can exist in many forms, so formatting is different. Um, Sometimes the purpose for writing is different, so the goals for the formatting of an essay might be different based on those purposes. But generally, this picture on the left is what you will expect from the essays we'll be writing. So there's an introduction of some sort, typically in the form of an introduction paragraph. There's the body of the essay, which is the meat and potatoes of the essay. This is where you include your main ideas and the biggest part of your content. And then there's finally the conclusion. This is normally in a conclusion paragraph, just like the introduction, and it wraps up the essay. Writing an essay requires insight, according to that reading, and you can either gain insight from personal experiences or scholarship. And we're going to do both this semester. So, our personal narrative, which is the first essay we have, will be based on personal experience, obviously. The second essay we'll be writing will be more focused on some readings that we do. And then the third essay we write is a personal argument. So, again, leaning on your personal experiences. The last essay we write before our final is a research essay. So again, leaning on scholarship. So we're going to do a little bit of both, a good mix. But we will learn how to synthesize our ideas both from our personal experiences, so the personal opinions and examples that we can pull from our personal lives, and from scholarship. So reading, research, reading outside sources, and finding insight gained from there. So I mentioned the purpose of writing. Lots of different people write for different reasons. Here are just a few, but these are the primary ones. So purpose is the reason why we write, right? The purpose of the writing. We write for many different reasons. There are many ways to achieve your writing purpose, so you can choose a form to write in. For example, I'm going to give you an assignment where you are asked to tell a story, right? The narrative. But you could choose a form, choose the correct language, choose the style, the organization, and the kinds of evidence. And this is what kind of forms your purpose, right? Here are some examples. The biggest one in the middle is to communicate. Kind of all of these purposes function as a means of communication, right? So even if your purpose is not specifically to communicate, you are communicating through your writing. There's also to inform, to persuade, to entertain, to express, to argue, and to explain. Some of those will certainly overlap. For example, lots of things that explain or argue also inform, right? Argument and persuasion are very similar, and entertaining and expressing oneself in their writing are often overlapping in some way. Here are some questions you can consider when trying to decide on the purpose of an essay or the purpose of your writing, right? The first is, are you trying to sound more personal or more authoritative? Are you trying to come at it from a personal experience kind of state, or are you trying to be the authority on this topic at hand? When you're writing argumentative or persuasive or inform purpose, then obviously you will want an authoritative sound to you. Whereas sometimes if you're writing a story or trying to entertain someone, it might be a more personal purpose. Secondly, are you wanting to entertain or inform? You can certainly do both, but most of the time, things written for entertainment are not also written for information, right? And likewise, things written to inform, their main purpose is not to entertain, it is to inform. Third, are you relating to your audience or keeping the audience distant? So are you kind of putting the audience in your own shoes? Are you trying to create some sort of empathy through what you write with your audience? Or is it more about keeping them at a distance and proving to them things with facts and logic, right? And then finally, do you want to sound formal or informal? Lots of personal writing can be formal. It doesn't have to be informal, but you also can choose to sound informal. And we will have several different types of writing assignments this semester. And some of the things we turn in this semester will be informal, right? I'm not looking for formality or professionalism. When we come to our personal essays, which is the first essay we'll be writing, these are written from the writer's personal experiences. So it will be your personal point of view. You'll use words like I and me and we to tell the story. When we write personal essays, we do it to share significant moments in our lives. These moments are retold because they might be influential, they might be informative in some way. You can get educated from them, or you might be entertaining your readers. So there's lots of purposes you could bring to this personal essay. So consider, what is your purpose for telling this story? Personal essays address the most problematic and fundamental question of all: what does it mean to be human? Right? We are sharing human experiences with other humans, and there's no other species that would understand this experience, right, other than us. By sharing the insights and lessons we've learned from our life experiences, we can add to our community's collective wisdom. So inherently, there is some need to share and inform in our personal essays, even if they are also meant to entertain or educate. Consider the purpose of your own personal narrative. Once you have come up with some ideas about what you might want to write about, what is the purpose? Discover your purpose. Do you want to entertain your reader? Are you trying to educate them, persuade them, inform them? Are you trying to express yourself or explain something about your life? You will get to make these decisions. It's your essay, but you can't try to do too many things at one time, right? A personal essay needs to have a singular or even secondary purpose that it's really focusing on. So the next reading that you likely partook in was the reading about the writing process and narration. This is going to be key to your success in the personal narrative that we're about to start working on. So consider these things really thoughtfully when you are going to start writing your essays. So first is the writing process itself, right? You likely have heard parts of this before, but maybe not the whole thing. My in-person class was explaining to me that they sometimes did pre-writing exercises, but never really did like revision or editing or drafting, you know. So this is a writing process from beginning to end. In the first stage of the writing process, you're going to commit to what is called pre-writing. As it says on the name, it's before writing, right? Pre-writing. This can include free writing, which we will partake in for a discussion board, I believe. Brainstorming, coming up with ideas through clusters of ideas in a storm-like fashion. Doing research also participates in the pre-writing section, and then doing an outline, if you've ever done an outline. All of these are pre-writing steps that can make the actual writing and drafting steps so much easier for you. Which moves us to writing and drafting. This is where you create your rough draft. It's called rough draft for a reason, because it is rough, right? It is not polished. It is not perfect. It does the job of getting ideas down in some sort of manner, but it is not the final product by any means. Once you have created a full rough draft, you will go to the step of revising. Revising just means to make more polished, to make stronger, right? So in your second draft, you will take your rough draft that you've already written and then revise it according to any feedback you might have gotten from me specifically, from your own assessment of what you think might make it stronger, any advice you got from maybe the Writing Center, any editing software you might be using, so like grammar, checking grammar in a Word document. These are all steps for revising. Once you have revised your essay and you think it's much stronger now in the second draft, you will then go to edit the essay. And this is really the final step of work for you. You will correct any grammar or spelling errors, correct the formatting. This will be something we work on hugely in the later half of the semester. And then any citations you might need to include, making sure that those are correct. This is where you're polishing the essay. You have the content where you want it. You have organized it in the way that you feel is best. And this is where you're just polishing it up so that when you submit it for step 5, it is the best it can be. Sometimes submitting means submitting to an instructor. Sometimes it means publishing. So you will go through these steps every time that we encounter a writing project. The thing about the writing process is, though, that sometimes it is not streamlined. It is not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sometimes you are in the pre-writing step and then you go to drafting and you realize I'm not as prepared as I thought I was for drafting. So I'm going to go back and create an outline. So that means going back to step 1 again. Sometimes when you get to the revising step on your second draft, you find that you need to do more pre-writing, so more research or free writing to come up with more ideas to include. And finally, when you're in the editing step, you might find something that you need to revise still, content that needs to be moved around or reorganized. So don't be afraid to go back to previous steps. This is not you going back in success, right? You are stepping towards success every time you move to a new step, even if it's moving back. As I say here, the writing process is not always linear. Sometimes you might need to go back to previous steps in the process, and this is okay. That's why writing is a process and not a strict formula, right? I say here you might go from pre-writing to writing and then need to go back to pre-writing in your revision step, right? So as you become more practiced writers, the move from one step to the next will become more apparent and more second nature to you. It will happen more smoothly for you, but for now, this might be the first time that you're writing in form of a process. So if that's the case, take your time, give yourself time to go back to previous steps if you need to, and give yourself some grace. So when we are writing this first essay is the personal narrative. Remember the purposes we talked about: to explain, to persuade, to entertain, to influence, to express oneself, to inform, or to instruct. These are some purposes that you can choose for your own personal narration, right? And consider each purpose and what might be the main purpose for you for your personal narrative. This is the structure of a narrative essay. They are written like many stories are. So if you've ever read a short story or a novel or anything, narrative essays are just that, telling a story. So when we are structuring our narrative essay, trying to figure out what comes first, what comes last, all of our essays will have a beginning, middle, and end, right? Like so many stories, there is a purpose for the narrative essay to be written, something the reader can take away, learn, or better understand. So when we are writing our narrative essays, you will need to decide, what is the beginning of this story? Sometimes that's not super clear cut because human lives are complex, right? So you'll have to decide what's the beginning of the story and where does the story actually end? Does it end a day after it started or years later, right? Because of a narrative essay being written about a specific moment in time, you'll need to use what are called transition words or time markers to indicate movement in space and time. So here are some on the left as examples. The middle column are like chronology. So after I did that, I did this. Later on that day, I went to ice cream or something. I was sitting on the couch until something crazy happened in the kitchen, right? Things like that. So these time markers we use in everyday conversations. They are easy to grab, but they'll be useful in your storytelling because often it is the case that we already know the details of the story, so we can kind of put them in place in time, but your reader won't. So you'll have to outline the time or chronology of the events that you narrate. Other aspects of the narration include specifics, details, and description. These are often what I'm grading on specifically. So the time markers are important, but also coming up with specific details and descriptive language. The more specific and descriptive you can be in your own writing, the better, right? So one way to make sure that you're telling a strong narrative is to include 3 aspects of a story: the plot, which are the main events and occurrences in the story. These are the things that take place, right? The plot of my morning this morning: I woke up, I put on a cup of coffee, I fed the dogs, and then I walked them. I came back in, I had my coffee and packed my bag. I got ready for work, and then I came to work, right? That's the plot of my morning. Nothing really interesting happened really, but the main events that I have told you took place, those are the plot of my day. Characters are any people that appear in the story. So if you're telling a story about high school, any of your friends who might have been there, your siblings, your mom, your dad, those might be characters in your story. It's important to name those characters when they come into view of the story, because that will give the reader something to hold on to. And then finally, conflict. Every story has conflict, and this is probably the purpose of the story itself. What is the conflict of it, right? It's the climactic event or problem that arises in the story. So for your personal narratives, this can be anything, right? This can be a time that you experienced something scary or tragic. It can be a time when you experienced something exciting or new for the first time, something that made you nervous, something that made you happy, the best day of your life, the worst day of your life, right? Anything in between. So consider what conflict your story will have. Finally, include descriptive details. I will go over this more a little bit later as we get towards the personal narratives that we're going to be reading for the class, but there are two things to remember when looking to add details to your story. There are the 4 W's: where, who, when, and what. And then there are the 5 senses: smell, taste, touch, and sight and sound. So the 4 W's, you answer those questions to get more details about your story, right? So for example, where did it take place? That can be, your backyard, or it can be Phoenix, Arizona, right? Who was there? Those are your characters. When did it take place? This can be, summer of my junior year, or this could be 1997 or something, depending on when in the world you want to situate your story. And then finally, the what actually happened. These are the events of the story. Your 5 senses will give you more descriptive detail. So instead of saying, I walked into class, it was gloomy, you can say, I smelled the rain outside, or I smelled the freshly cut grass. I tasted the food at the restaurant. I touched the soft jacket that I was wearing that day, the fuzzy jacket. I saw my best friend light up when I told her this, or I heard her laughing down the hallway, right? These are our 5 senses, and these can really develop a scene from just events, just a list of events, to something actually tangible that you can grab onto and you can tell a good story with. All right, so that is all for me today. Please make sure to get these videos watched every week so that you can catch up on the lectures. I try to make them as short as possible so that you can watch them quickly, but the content is really important along with the slides. So if you have any questions about any of the content we went over today, please let me know and I'd be happy to help.